led the league in tackles with 85. The deep ball for Darius Prince, and Philadelphia's on the board first.
On the draw, this is Grayson Alene. And Alene weaving his way all the way down to the 22.
10-yard line, 5. Mayfield, dancing all around. Throw it as far as he can throw it. Jump ball coming. Crazy stuff. Not this time.
And you want to be a wide receiver. You're going to have to take a little bit of a hit like that as Brown got him in that shoulder, but watch. Those are teeth.
Do we have a dentist on staff here?
Good morning. We are back for another episode of Around the Indoor Football World. It is myself, Sam Shady, and I am joined by our newest contributor to the Shady Sports Network, TJ Bartholomew. How are you doing this morning, TJ?
Good. How are you?
Doing great. Ready to talk about another great weekend of arena football or indoor football, depending on how you look at it. I'm not here to argue about the differences, just so we're all clear. So we're going to jump into the AIF first, but give me just a moment. It just occurred to me that neither one of our guests have shown up yet. So that is something that is kind of slightly odd. But let me just see if they're going to come on, and then we'll get into it. But the rather big news of the recent week was the fact that the AIF, or at least the majority of their teams, have merged with the NAL. We've talked a lot about this in the past couple of weeks due to the fact that we had a feeling this was coming. So I'm curious to get your overall feelings now that it's official. How do you feel about the NAL as it stands right now?
I feel it's probably the strongest it's ever been. They already have a handful of established teams playing in their league already, and now they bring on some other strong teams. Me personally, I'm probably only about 2 hours away from the Harrisburg Stampede. So it's pretty exciting news around the area for Stampede fans. And if you'd have told me last year or 2 years ago that the NAL would be this far ahead already, they're definitely forging ahead, and they're definitely forging ahead in the right direction.
I definitely agree. I mean, a lot of us talked about the fact that, the NAL was falling apart once again in 2024. Last season we watched them drop 3 teams mid-year, I guess Columbus kind of left, before the 2023 season technically, but it was right before the 2023 season, and then they lost 2 teams inside the season, and then they were down to 5 teams, went back up to 8, went into the 2024 season and watched the exact same thing happen, right back down to 5 teams. But we're now in a position where they've not only expanded bigger than I've seen as an NAL fan, but they've also been able to bring in, like you said, established teams we don't necessarily have to worry are going to disappear into the night, tomorrow or anything like that. So I really think that they've done a great job of building a great foundation for the NAL in 2024 or 2025. I apologize. But it is interesting to see how they've gone about acquiring these teams. Excuse me. We knew Wheeling was going to move to the NAL. I have to ask, did you, or not to the NAL, but we knew they were moving. Did you see them moving to the NAL right away?
I was kind of hoping they were, just because the previous season in the AAL2, they were just completely outmatching pretty much everybody they played. So really just to remain consistent with competition, the NAL seemed like the most viable option, or maybe the AIF before the merger happened. And who knows, maybe they were planning on joining, them, and then they got maybe a little bit of a precursor and just said, well, we'll just make the jump to the NAL. Again, it's my opinion. I'm not associated with them. But I think it's a very good move, and they are a very well-run franchise from what I understand. So it's definitely a strong addition to the NAL.
I agree. And one of the big things that's come out of this merger has been interesting to me is when you go from one team on the East Coast, kind of on an island there by itself in Carolina, to now you have 4 East Coast teams. So it's a situation where I think that you really have helped stabilize Carolina long term as well. I know they've had some concerns with their ownership group as of late, with Rob Storm's issues, new guys coming in. It's one of those situations where you just don't really know what was going to happen for the Cobras, and ultimately I think these 3 other teams coming in kind of threw Carolina a lifeline a little bit. And I think that's a great thing for one of the storied franchises in the NAL. I think it's a great thing for the league because if you don't want to lose any of these teams, especially a team like Carolina.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, Carolina, you can argue, has been the class of the NAL for a few years now. And it's kind of just the mindset of they've stuck it out, and now it's light at the end of the tunnel. So I'm really excited about what next season will bring, and I'm honestly excited to see potentially they are in the rumor mill vetting other teams they've announced. So I'm interested to see if they do bring in any other teams, and if there will be more East Coast even added maybe to it as well.
Absolutely. So one thing I don't believe we touched on last week is that I've got the information that there are actually 7 other teams being vetted currently right now. I don't know every single team that's being vetted. I know a lot of them are teams we'll probably recognize. We can pick out a handful of them just based off inference. Considering what has happened with AIF. So I mean Amarillo, Beaumont. I would imagine not the Corpus Christi, the Cedar Rapids teams, one of them are trying to get in. So that's at least a handful of them there. But I also heard that some folded AFL franchises have inquired about entrance into the NAL. When you hear that, given that I wasn't told exactly which teams, who strikes you as a team that's folded from the AFL that could potentially look to the NAL for a merger?
I would say probably as a group, pretty much every team that was league owned. Just because the areas got super hyped about being an arena team back. Most of them played at least, 2 to 3 games apiece. So they got the excitement up. They got the real live action in front of the fans. So it's almost like the marketing's already taken care of. So whoever can step in with the funding is already ahead of the game.
That's a really good point, and I'm glad you brought that up because that is true. If you were able to come back, and even if it's not, like, say you go to Georgia and it's not the Georgia Force, or you go to Philadelphia and it's not the Philadelphia Soul, you have a good chance of potentially capturing that market and the work that the AFL did to an extent. It just depends on how the fans feel about the league and if they realize the difference between the NAL and the AFL. Because that could change a lot for fans, to be quite honest. Cameron says it would be great if a Louisiana team could happen. Lafayette sounded ready to love a team again. Yes, they did. It seemed like that entire Louisiana area was really excited about having a team back. And it's a situation where I think that's a really good area for a team. If you look at the map, you kind of need a bridge from Carolina and the other East Coast states over to Texas. Well, what better bridge than Louisiana? That makes a lot of sense to me. So I think that could be a situation where they look at that state and, ultimately I put out a poll yesterday about releasing a bit of information that we have that I have not put out or said to anybody outside of our group chats in the network. And Cameron, I don't know if you read my mind or something, but it sounds like there is going to be a Louisiana team in the NAL, and it sounds like that is the ownership group that is already approved, and that is the 10th team that will be in the National Arena League in 2025. So, like I said, a lot of logic to this move. I really think that the NAL is trying to do everything they can to not only bring in quality teams, but bring in markets that make sense. They're trying to bridge the gap in between the markets they already have. They're trying to do their best to limit travel. So this is a good move for everybody involved, and I ultimately think it's going to be very interesting to see who pops up as the owner of the group. Excuse me, but Definitely interested to see exactly how that team shapes up. What's your first reaction to hearing that there is going to be a Louisiana team in the NAL?
Kind of to what you've already addressed, I'm not surprised by that. They did have a really big following in initial promotions and everything, and I did keep a close eye on some of the teams that didn't make it. I'll just say it that way in the AFL, and I did hear the head coach at the time of the Voodoo on a couple different podcasts and stuff to just describing everything that was going on. And it sounded like even with the uncertainty, the fan base was still there. So in my opinion, if they are going to join the NAL, they're going to be on a much more solid foundation than, obviously the previous regime's AFL was. And they already have the following. So I think they have a shot to be really successful if they can really run things up to par.
I completely agree, and that's one of the big questions that I've had about this situation. Will James Shiver be involved in this Louisiana team? And I think it would be a good move for them to try and get him involved if they can in any capacity, because I think the work that he did down in Louisiana was essentially all him. We talked about the fact that that team was league owned. We were fed a line of BS that they were not league owned from start to finish. But at the same time, we ended up finding out the hard way they were league owned, and that's why they're no longer around. The thing with that is, I kept in touch with James Shiver throughout this entire situation, even to this day. And, I really just think he's a good person, and that's a big reason why I will continue to stay in touch with him, no matter if he's in football or not. But in this particular situation, he had gone out and tried to find investors. He tried to bring people in that would be able to foot the bill for some of the stuff that was going on with the Voodoo, because he saw the potential of the Louisiana market. He saw the fans coming to support. He saw that there was going to be a lot of uproar when the team really got going. So he went out and he sought out investors, ownership groups, all of that. So he had actually come in contact with multiple groups that were interested in owning a team in Louisiana. And that's why I'm so curious to see who ends up popping up as the owner. I know that he spoke with multiple groups. I don't know the exact names of every single group, but there's a couple names on that list that are very interesting that could come back and be really a strong partner for the NAL and really take it to the next level. And one of them in particular should strike a lot of people as making sense, and that's Kerry Eklund. Kerry Eklund was the original, correct me if I'm wrong, but the original owner of the Indoor Football League before it became the IFL that it is today. And he later owned the PIFL as well, if I'm not mistaken. But that's how James Shiver and him came into contact, and they've kind of stayed in touch over the years. But he expressed some interest about returning. Now, if you could get a Kerry Eklund involved in the NAL on top of everything else that they've got there with Ricky Burtz and Sioux City and all these other teams that are established, I think that could be a really big move for the NAL going forward. Cameron says, definitely hoping that Beaumont can get themselves approved. Then Corpus Christi needs someone they can bust to. I completely agree, and that's another reason why I would like to see Amarillo still somehow make it in the league, and maybe it's a situation where they do need to change the ownership group like we've talked about on here before. But I think that it's ultimately they would be a good addition because of all the Texas teams coming in. Any thoughts on the potential of Amarillo coming back? Any of these things that I just kind of ran through there?
It would be good for location's sake. I mean, obviously, short travel is key to success in any kind of indoor and arena league, cutting costs. But I think the biggest question is, do they have the financials to do it? Are they, going to bring somebody else in? Who knows? But it would be a great addition if they can swing it. But I just unfortunately, I don't know if they could pass the vetting process that the NAL is doing right now.
That's my concern as well. And if they're able to make it work as far as financially, then I would love to see them in the league. And, if we could get to like a 16-team NAL, I mean, how much of a night and day difference would that be? Going from 2023, you finish with 5 teams. 2024, you finish with 5 teams, and you go to 2025 and you have 16 teams. That would be unreal, the turnaround that's happened. But honestly, already I am thoroughly impressed with what the NAL has done. And I'm curious on your thoughts. I mean, when you look at everything they've set up already, I know we've talked about the fact that's a good foundation. Did you see any of this coming this offseason prior to this?
No, not at all. I expected them to try and seek out and step up their vetting process and try to get more established teams, but I didn't think it would kind of happen in a whirlwind effect like it is. But again, it is great for the NAL. They have been around for a while now, and to see them get firm footing is great. Obviously a new commissioner as of this past season, and he's making things happen in a positive way. It's great to see.
Absolutely. And Cameron had another question. Any chance Oklahoma returns? As of right now, everything I'm hearing, that's negative. Maybe that's subject to change. But as of right now, I don't believe that any other ownership group has taken them over. And they're still in the possession of the previous owner who had to fold. I haven't heard any whispers about them returning yet. I had heard initially that it was possible, but it's kind of quieted since. So maybe at some point they kind of pop back up. I hope they do. I really like their branding. I really like a lot of what they're doing on social media and stuff like that. They were staying very engaged with fans, but I would be surprised at this juncture if Oklahoma was a part of the NAL in 2025. Looks like Cody's already tuning in. So with that in mind, we can go ahead and shift over to the IFL and then maybe circle back to the AFL stuff at the end there. So we'll go ahead and just jump over to IFL. So real quick before we do that, I'm going to run and he just dropped off. Real quick before we get over to the IFL or the AFL, we will run a quick commercial and we'll be right back. All right, and we're going to go ahead and jump over to the IFL as of right now and talk about a whole lot of close games this past weekend. And we'll see if we can't get Cody on here. He's having some technical difficulties at the moment. But basically, this past weekend was a week of very, very important games and very close games. And basically, we're going to run through a couple of these games for you. The biggest one, in my personal opinion, was that NAS comeback over Bay Area. Man, talk about an impressive game by NAS to kind of stay in that and ultimately find their way back to victory after being down at one point. We'll see if we got Cody figured out. You good to go?
I think so. Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
All right, cool.
Awesome. So we just transitioned over to the IFL. And we were just starting to talk about the NAS comeback win over Bay Area. Let's just go ahead and go to you right away. I mean, what were your thoughts seeing NAS ultimately finish off a comeback victory in that game? Did you think they had any chance of a win when we were headed in the fourth quarter there?
Not really. You had to recover 2 onside kicks. You had to hit a deuce and hit a 2-point conversion and do all of that stuff while, the other team made mistakes. I mean, if anything does not fall Northern Arizona's way in any of those scenarios, it's like a 1 in a million chance and it worked. Like you don't see that very often. And I don't know. Do they ride that wave of momentum? Like I said, it was an amazing game. I'm so impressed by what Northern Arizona was able to do. But on the other side, you're just like, man, is this just a blip on the radar, or is this something a little more concerning for Bay Area?
That's completely fair, because all of a sudden they've lost a couple games, and it's interesting to see how their seasons progressed. You know, at one point they were the second seed. Now they're very, very ahead of the pack at this point in the first seed. So if they start slipping, they could kind of come back down to the earth here really quickly. TJ, were you surprised to see how that game finished up, given the circumstances of what we were looking at headed into the fourth quarter?
Yeah, because I honestly flipped the game and went to another one, and then I saw the final score update, and I was like, what happened? But much to Cody's point, you know, it's if every single thing didn't go in their favor, I mean, give them credit. They never quit. They kept grinding, and they hung around, and they got the win. But that's one of those games where afterwards you don't necessarily hang your hat on the win. You're just happy you got the win, and you got a lot to clean up for these last couple weeks.
Yeah, I completely agree. And actually, I wanted to talk about the fact that you look at coaching in the IFL, and it seems like it's very important, maybe even more so important in the IFL and indoor football in general than it is in outdoor football. I mean, you look at some of these teams that are consistently good, the Naz Wranglers, for instance, Bay Area Panthers, Massachusetts, teams like this that have had fairly established coaches year after year after year. Arizona, to me, it's kind of crazy to see that the same team over and over and over and over find a way to be successful. How important do you think coaching is in the IFL, Cody?
I think it's the number one priority. Now, that's not to knock any of like first-year head coaches or something. You got to get your foot in the door somewhere, but you're kind of doing a hybrid model of college and pros. You're doing the recruiting. There is no preseason. There is no draft. There is nothing. You have to go out there and find the guys from colleges, mainly lower-level colleges, D2, D3, NAIA. Yes, you do get D1s in there. But you have to do that. You have to develop these guys that have never played this game before or are very limited in what they've done indoor-wise. It's a completely different realm than outdoor. You have to do that. No preseason. Take these guys, 2 weeks of training camp, and boom, you're already in the game. And then throughout the season, you're bringing in bodies from injuries or players refusing to report. And then, hey, you're starting this week. We just signed you. Get out there on the field. You got to learn. I think it's the number one priority. And that, again, not to knock any coaches that are first year, second year, you got to start somewhere, but it shows the tenor of someone like a Les Moss, someone like a Rob Keefe, which we just mentioned in that game, how good the coaching is. A Kevin Guy, and even, he just retired, but the wealth of wins that Curtis Riggs was able to accomplish. Coaching to me is the number one priority for indoor football.
Absolutely. And obviously, let's go to our resident coach here, TJ. I mean, you've lived that life. You've been the guy who was recruiting the players, who were coaching the players, trying to develop when you have typically a very small staff. So, I mean, how important is coaching in the indoor football world?
It's pretty much everything. You are the GM. You are helping get sponsors. You are at times, maybe fronting a bill momentarily while, until you can get the money back later. It's a lot, definitely a lot more than in the NFL. And like it was already said, when you get to a certain level in the outdoor game, it's pretty much, they know what to do. They know how to do it. You're just there to make sure they stay on point. In the indoor and arena world, it's just as much development for players as it is having them hone their skills once they've already achieved a certain level. It's definitely, you are literally a one-trick pony as a coach in indoor and arena football.
That makes perfect sense. And I think the teams that have the established coaches and are a big reason why they're so good year after year is the fact that they are able to offer development for these players. You see some players come into indoor football, and I mean no disrespect to some of the coaching staffs out there, but they don't gain anything. It's just more exposure. It's just a new level. They're not necessarily getting better. But, you know, you see players come through Mass and they go right back outdoors often, you know, because they're actually developing. Same thing with Arizona. You saw Kyrie Woods come in, and now he's one of the best players in the USFL or the UFL. Sorry. You know, so there's multiple situations like this across the league, and it's very important to have those coaches to be able to continue to develop players and then also lure in the next wave of free agents and get the most talented players that are available. My son is trying to join us in this video right now. So let's go ahead and move on to the San Antonio win over Mass. Were you guys surprised to see Mass fall in this game when it was really important to them for their playoff situation?
I guess I'll start. Not really. Massachusetts, they've not really been a roller coaster as much as other teams throughout the year. They've been kind of consistent, but they do have games where they just kind of slip up. And I feel like this was one of them. I know at the time, San Antonio, I don't believe, were they already eliminated at that point? I can't remember. I know that they were fighting for their playoff lives dependent on what happened with was Arizona and San Diego and what all that stuff. I can't remember. Correct me if I'm wrong. But yeah, it's just something like that where I think San Antonio has been aggressive all season. I've mentioned it in some of my videos. They've been aggressive all season. They live and die by the deuce, by the 2-point conversion, by anything and everything. It's the reason why their record is what it is. They've lost close games. They've won close games. This one was kind of no different. So I look at more like San Antonio was just being very aggressive, and Massachusetts was like, well, if we sneak out the win, we sneak out the win. That's just my perspective on it.
No, it makes a lot of sense, honestly. And I was surprised to see San Antonio win, but I knew they were going to be fighting with everything they had, given the fact that they still had an outside shot at the playoffs. But I think you're right. They either found out they were eliminated shortly after the game or somewhere in the game as it was progressing. TJ, were you surprised to see Mass fall in this game?
Going in, I knew it was going to be a close game for at least majority of the 60 minutes. I didn't think they would pull it off, but Massachusetts, they've played a lot of close games. They've played a couple blowout wins. It seems, I don't know if they maybe get a little too comfortable in some games or what the deal is, but they're definitely a good team, but I don't think they fully reached their potential yet, given, their recent struggles.
I completely agree. And it will be interesting to see how San Antonio and Massachusetts recover from this game. Obviously, as we just talked about, San Antonio is now eliminated from the playoffs. So do they all of a sudden, revisit their approach? Do they start bringing in young players to prepare for next season? How do they kind of react to this loss? And then also, this win, sorry. And then also on the flip side, how does Mass react to this? They've gave up a couple players right before this win. Do they try and bring some other players in? Is there a solution in-house currently? It's interesting to see them kind of have this slide as of late. There was a point where they were right there neck and neck with Green Bay, and now all of a sudden they're potentially in the 4 seat. So do you guys have any idea what might be causing all this with Massachusetts? TJ, do you have any idea?
It may have been comfortability. They were up there, and when things are rolling good, you kind of just ride the wave. Then when the wave crashes like it has for them, you kind of have to reevaluate things. And it's like you said, do they bring some guys back? Do they, honestly, in my opinion, do they even take these last 2 regular season games and just try different things to see what could hit in the playoffs? But the fact that they are I believe they're clinched. They can only be adjusted in seeding. I would use these next 2 games as experiment to really hit the playoffs on a strong note.
I think that's a good idea. Cody, any thoughts on what TJ just said? And then also what could potentially be the problem in Massachusetts?
I don't really have any problems. Our insider for Massachusetts isn't here right now, so we can't get into that. But I kind of agree with TJ. You kind of just ride the wave these next 2 weeks. You know you're either going to Green Bay or you're going to Frisco. For me, it would be something along the lines of, do you have Benefield start? How much can you kind of bench and still stay healthy? I know Krish said last week that they're hoping to get Zico off of injured reserve and maybe another body or two as well. Like I said, is it just about getting healthy in these next 2 weeks? And then what all depends on, obviously, Quad City and Tulsa, not to make a segue, but if Tulsa wins this game, Quad City loses this week, and then Massachusetts plays Tulsa next week, do we have a different team get in the playoffs? I don't know. But for Massachusetts, it just kind of comes down to what are you trying to accomplish in order to pull an upset? Like, do they pull an upset? That's the big thing. They just have not shown me anything where they can compete with Tulsa and Green Bay, but I don't know. There's just something where it just seems like they're like half a step below them right now. And like TJ said, is this something in the next 2 weeks where you just experiment with that and find something new or a different niche that you can kind of exploit to maybe pull set upset?
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. And honestly, I like what TJ said, because if I was a coach, that's exactly how I would use these last 2 games. You already know you're in the playoffs. Figure out what works. You have 2 games that really don't matter. I mean, you definitely need to start experimenting a little bit and try and figure out exactly what is going to turn the tide for the Pirates right now, because right now it's looking rough. But we will go ahead and segue, as you mentioned, into the Quad City game, which was another great game. I mean, this week in the IFL was probably one of the best weeks of games and their finishes in a long time. And that's saying a lot, because there's been a lot of great games this season so far. But I mean, there were so many games decided by one score this week. I mean, Massachusetts, Quad City and Sioux Falls, Vegas and San Diego. You had Bay Area, Northern Arizona, and then also Arizona and Tucson, all decided by one score this week. So it's an unbelievable week of football, and hopefully it carries over into this week with all the playoff implications. But ultimately, Quad City was able to get the victory in this one. I believe it came in overtime, if I'm not mistaken. It did. And Quad City was able to get the 1-point victory, which surprising to see how that all fell there at the end. But, another great game. Any thoughts on this one right off the bat, Cody?
It's just, hold on. Excuse me. It's just more of the same from Quad City. As the resident Quad City fan, they just, it's not the problem at quarterback. It's just that what of a 1-2 punch do you have? It came down to Sioux Falls going for 2. They didn't get it. Otherwise, this is a completely different game. Mike Irwin came in with Judd Erickson kind of struggling. He struggled last week. I don't know. You've had times where Mike Irwin has started and Judd Erickson has had to come in as a relief pitcher, as to say. I don't know where Quad City goes. It's just they've not necessarily had an offensive identity. I've been ranting and raving to get Edward Vander involved a lot more. The passing game can click when it does, but it really has to have things go right to do that. The defense is all right. I do like the defensive line. The secondary leaves a little bit to be desired. I do like Bubba Arslanian as a signing and linebacker. As I said last week when we were going through all of this, I just think this is kind of a Quad City maybe can clinch this week. And if they do, it's just kind of a 1v4 victory for whoever gets the 1 seed. I mean, Quad City's going to make the playoffs. If they don't, Tulsa makes the playoffs, and whoever it is, just kind of fodder for whoever wins that 1 seed.
Yeah, it'll be a tough game for Quad City to win. I mean, but hey, you got to be there to win it. So it'll be interesting to see if they can pull the upset off. But TJ, what were your thoughts on this game?
This game lived up to the billing. They always say the 2 most dangerous teams to have to face are teams either fighting for their playoff lives or teams with nothing to lose. and you had one of each pairing up in this matchup, and it came down to the wire in overtime. Quad City, they win and they're in, and I see them making a deep playoff run? No, but do I see them potentially pulling an upset or at least fighting tooth and nail with whoever they get matched up with in the first round? I would not be surprised.
Yeah, I mean, I will say that they've got a lot of really talented players. Warren Newman, former USFL guy, Judd Erickson came from the ELF. A lot of these guys on this team are very good. They just need to be able to be put in the right position to find success on a week in, week out basis. But I don't know. Like I said, I don't know if they're going to be able to overcome what is expected to be quite the competition in week one of the playoffs. So, I mean, it's going to be tough for them, but we'll see. We'll see. I hope for my guy Omar out there, I hope they find victory, but it's not looking promising so far. But we will go ahead and move into another one of the close games this weekend, which was, of course, San Diego over Vegas, which is, again, another 1-point victory and a very crucial game to playoff seeding. Let's go to Cody first on this one.
Yeah, to kind of borrow the line from TJ, I think this game lived up to the billing. This was just one of those games where you were just kind of on the edge of your seat the entire time. Another game that comes down to a 2-point conversion that doesn't convert. I think San Diego did deserve the win. Vegas they don't look lost, but again, this is not the 7-0 Vegas team that we all thought was tops of the league at the time. That's not to say that Vegas is in trouble because, again, the West is very packed. They have a chance to clinch a playoff spot today. Will they do it? We'll find out. That's the game of the week. But, yeah, it was a fun game. I did enjoy it. Nate Davis is just, I don't know, Father Time's going to get him. But at any point, Nate Davis is just going to slice you alive, man. He is such a great quarterback. I know how old he is, and he doesn't probably have a shot outdoors or anything like that. But, God, what could have been,
Yeah, I mean, former 5th-round pick in the NFL, obviously he's got the talent to be there. But when I spoke with him, I had him on for an interview probably about 2 years ago now. He actually mentioned that at one point he was asked to move to running back to stay in the NFL. And he basically told him, no way, I'm a quarterback, and here we are. So now he's, basically the Peyton Manning of the IFL, as I always call him. But he could have been a running back in the NFL, so kind of weird to see. But he is a bigger dude. I think he's 225, 230, something like that. But still, when I see Nate Davis, I don't see a running back, so it just seems like an odd switch. TJ, what were your thoughts on this game?
This game has pretty much been Vegas for the past probably 2 months or so. Like Cody said, they don't seem lost, but they just don't know how to hang on and pull out the win late. After starting off 7-0, they've gone 2-5, and 3 of those 5 losses are within 3 points or less. And the other 2 losses were 5- and 6-point losses. So they're in every game. They just can't figure out a way to close it out in the end. I kind of see the same sort of situation happening for them as the last segment, because they are 1 win in the final 2 weeks and in. So, and later today they face the Wranglers, and the next week they're at home against the Sugar Skulls. So I mean, both of those games could easily end in losses for them as well, because the Wranglers, they keep playing tough, and the Sugar Skulls, I mean, I think we all know, never doubt a team led by Billy Back. So it's not an easy, 1 win out of final 2, but if they can kind of maybe even experiment a little bit, try some different stuff just to try and get that win, or even just buckle down and really, focus and grind back to where they were at 7-0, they could turn the season around. But right now it's kind of seeming like they're starting to fizzle a little too early.
Yeah, I completely agree. And that is something that Vegas definitely has to get under control really quickly. They've got, they've faced a lot of really good teams recently. So that is one caveat to all of this. Bay Area is no slouch, obviously. San Diego, no slouch. I mean, a lot of these losses that they've taken recently, they've been playing against the teams they're going to play in the playoffs, which should be very concerning if you're Vegas's coaching staff. Now, TJ, I want to pose this question to you. In my mind, a close victory or a close loss is typically brought down to somewhere throughout that game. There was one coaching decision that typically changes things. First of all, what do you think about that? I mean, do you think coaching is really the big difference in a close game? And if that's the case, do you see one scenario throughout this game or one scenario throughout the past couple games that have led to Vegas losing?
In terms of coaching, it does carry a big part of the game, especially in tight games like this, because you can see situational moments, and it's all about the decision making. On 4th and 5, do you kick a field goal or do you go for it? Do you make it or do you not? And then do you flip the field for the other team? It does come down to coaching and execution overall, and I don't see this as a problem for Vegas. They have a great coaching staff. I mean, obviously, again, they started off 7-0. I think they've just kind of hit a lull where they just can't seem to make those one or two big plays throughout the game. Because there are, in tight games like this, probably about a handful of times where you can look back and say, man, if we could have gotten that, or man, if we could have stopped them, that probably would have made the difference. And that's, especially as of late, what the Vegas Nighthawks unfortunately have been spending their time thinking about on the way home.
That is true. Definitely talked a lot with Evan Wilsmore, one of my buddies who works with Vegas, and they've definitely been frustrated as of late. But I'm sure that with Coach Davis there, Coach Chin, they're going to get it figured out, and they're going to get it figured out fast, I have a feeling. So hopefully this week. But one thing I wanted to talk about is this is not the same San Diego Strike Force team we've seen over the past couple seasons. I don't want to call it a lack of talent, because it's definitely not necessarily a lack of talent, but their talent level prior to this season, I don't think was near as high as it is this year. I mean, this year they've got guys like, of course, Byron Cooper, great linebacker, pass rusher, Arthur Jackson, the wide receiver, is lighting it up. Elijah Bell had a huge game in this game. Connor Mangan, great kicker. BJ Malo, he actually spurned the AFL to come play for San Diego. So that was a big move. Isaiah Cox, just the list goes on and on about all the guys they were able to bring in. Jaquan Artis, another great pass rusher. It's really just interesting to see, because over the past couple of years, I thought that San Diego was a little bit neglected in terms of the players they were bringing in and signing. But now this past season, it's been incredibly competitive, and they've had probably one of the best rosters in the league. Has there been any changes that I missed, Cody, that you think led to San Diego being a lot more competitive in 2024?
Yes. Excuse me. To start off the season, they just brought in a very veteran-laden roster. And I said it in my San Diego preview all the way back in February. What does this team do with all this veteran leadership? You bring in Nate Davis, but you lose your wide receiving core with Kentrez Bell and Carlos Thompson. So it was a little weary to me that they were only, I believe, bringing back Jordan Kress. They did bring back Rudy Johnson, which that's kind of been a catalyst on offense for them too. Getting Rudy Johnson involved in the running game, the receiving game, just that Swiss Army knife that has been really good for that offense. I think it also goes to the defense. I don't know the stats of San Diego from last year or the year before. Obviously, they didn't make the playoffs in either of those years. But to bring in Jaquan Ortiz, who was a defensive player of the year, 2 years ago, and then to have someone like a Keyshawn Walker from the CFL, to bring in Tavita Mwanga from Quad City, Byron Cooper, like you mentioned, VJ Mallow. They did bring back Ben Moa. I mean, and then you see the development of someone like Atoa Fox. They brought Dexter Reeson from Duke City. They are just very veteran laden on that defense. And I think that's kind of where it starts. Their defense is pretty good. And then you have the sharpshooter that is Nate Davis. He had to build some chemistry with his wide receiving core. And now you look at it, Arthur Jackson's on pace for an all-IFL season. Isaiah Cox, if he didn't really get hurt, has been very good himself. It's more of the same from what Nate Davis was kind of able to get from Duke City, but this is just kind of on an upper level on that.
Yeah, I agree. And honestly, kudos to San Diego for what they did at the wide receiver position. I know that Nate Davis had a large say on who stayed and who went there. So, I feel like he brought in some of the players, or had a big say on who was brought in. And so that kind of, I think, helped the chemistry aspect of it a little bit. But, you see it right here. He's spreading the ball around at an unbelievable level. When do you see a quarterback throw 5 touchdown passes and it goes to literally all 5 receivers he completed a pass to in a game? It's unbelievable to see how we're moving the ball on San Diego's offense. But then also, like you said, Arthur Jackson has been destroying it all season long. Elijah Lilly, a rookie that came out of nowhere, again, playing very well, has been one of the top kick returners in the league as well. Jordan Crest does what Jordan Crest does again. Rudy Johnson has been all over the field for San Diego. It's just they're just a different team. And honestly, it's awesome to see, because I'm a big fan of Taylor Genyozer. I think he's a great coach, and I honestly think that over the next couple of years, we're going to really see him come into his own, as long as Nate Davis is still there with him. All it took was a quarterback. He's got his guy now, so it's just a matter of building around and finding the last couple pieces to make this a championship squad. Let's see. We talked about the NAS game already. We talked about San Diego, Massachusetts, Quad City. So it looks like the last game of the weekend that was really meaningful that we need to talk about was Tucson at Arizona. So let's go to that game, and we'll start with TJ on this one. TJ, what were your thoughts about Arizona pulling out a last-second victory here against Tucson?
It really looked like the Sugar Skulls were going to pull off the upset, especially after their quick start. But much like their season's gone, late in the second half, they kind of let it slip away. But then on the flip side, the Rattlers, with Kevin Guy, they never seem to lose composure. They just battle back, and they have a never die attitude for the whole 60 minutes. Was I surprised Arizona came back? No, not at all. That's why they're one of the better teams, really, not just this season, but for pretty much their entire existence. They showed why they're a playoff team, and Tucson showed why they're on the outside looking in.
Yes, they did. And it seems like Tucson has had a lot of balls bounce the opposite direction in games this season so far. And you see it here kind of, with Vic Leventrant. He missed a couple extra points. There was a couple other situations that, had they fallen a different way, this might have been a win for Tucson. Cody, what were your thoughts on this game?
Yeah, unfortunately, it's just kind of more of the same from Tucson. But the one caveat I will say about this is, when you look at the transaction report and everything from last week to this week, I don't think Tucson made any changes. I think for the first time all season. So Billy Bat clearly saw something from last week to this week where they said, we kind of need to run this back, which is good. You need that continuity, especially in the indoor league, to kind of build that chemistry. So I think also getting more reps for Quincy Patterson will be nice, trying to figure out what you want to do offensively with what Billy Bat had with TJ Edwards and Frisco. Maybe he's got a blueprint right there with a running quarterback like Quincy Patterson, big bruising guy, and you're able to kind of go through him when it comes to the offense. I don't know if it was more Tucson let the game slip away from them, or Arizona just kind of flexed their muscle. I don't know. It was a fun game. I'm not going to lie about that one. It was a very fun game. I'll be honest. I didn't think Tucson would hold on. They didn't. But I do have to give credit where it's due. They held on for as long as they could. And there was was it a fumble by Mike Kerrigan there or something like that at the very end with 3 minutes or something to go, where Arizona took over and kind of just ran out the clock. So Yeah, Tucson definitely had an opportunity to win this game, and they just kind of let it slip. They've done that. They haven't done it all season, but they have had quite a few close losses that could have been wins had it bounced the other way. It's like what TJ mentioned. They just have had bad bounce luck.
Yeah, I mean, you hit the nail on the head right there. I mean, Arizona kicks off the ball. It goes to Tucson. Tucson fumbles. They recover. They score a touchdown, and they win the game. I mean, it's one of those unbelievable situations that there isn't much you can do as a coach in that situation. You know, you've basically coached your team to at least be in it at the very last minute and get the ball back. You know, a situation that most teams really would like to be in. And then you end up having that situation there at the end. So, I mean, it's got to be tough from Billy Back's perspective to deal with stuff like that. But at the same time, you know, the good coaches find a ways to win when it's, you know, the games like this. So I'm not saying Billy Back isn't a good coach, but there's definitely something just slightly not right in Tucson right now. Although I do like what you said about Quincy Patterson. I think there is something there. It's just a matter of figuring out if he's got enough in the passing department to be the guy, or if you need to mix in a second quarterback. You know, we saw him do that for a while there with Blake Sims and TJ Edwards a couple of years ago. So maybe we see that again in Tucson eventually. Any final thoughts on the IFL before we move on to the AFL playoffs? No? Okay, cool. Well, just real quick note to wrap this up. As of right now, as we mentioned, San Antonio has been eliminated from playoff contention. As of right now, the Eastern playoff race is completely clinched. So Green Bay, Frisco, Math, and Quad City are all in the playoff, although that 3-4 seed could swap. It just depends on what happens with Mass and Quad City the rest of the way. And then in the Western Conference, still to this day, Bay Area is the only one that's clinched. So that's a really interesting race there in the West. You have 4 different teams that are trying to fight for those last 3 spots. And I really think it's going to be a very entertaining couple weeks of football as they try to figure out exactly who will be in the playoffs for the Western Conference.
Can I correct that?
Yeah, go ahead.
I don't want to step on toes or anything like that. It's just not my place. But just to correct that, in the East, the 3 seeds have been clinched. Quad City can clinch today if they beat Tulsa. This is a must-win game for Tulsa this week. If Tulsa beats Quad City tonight, and then in Week 19, Tulsa beats Massachusetts, and Quad City loses to Jacksonville, Tulsa will actually clinch that 4th seed.
Oh, I apologize.
You're good.
My information is completely mistaken there.
And then in the West, San Diego has actually clinched based on like conference win percentage. They can't lose, like even if they lose the rest of their games or game, they can't fall any lower than 4th. And then Vegas can clinch tonight. And then it kind of hinges on if Arizona beats San Antonio in Week 19, they might get that 4th or final spot. Or if they lose in Northern Arizona, there's still kind of a way to do that. So it's still a little bit muddy in the West. But the East is, like you said, almost clinched. It just kind of comes down to that Quad City Tulsa game tonight.
Completely fair. I should have known all that. We discussed all this week in our private chat. We were kind of running down the scenarios early in the week, and I was taking notes, and I apparently missed San Diego, even though I knew they had clinched. That's my mistake. That's why I take notes, because I often forget things like that. So next time I will have to be a little bit better about taking notes.
I didn't think San Diego clinched either. Like I said, I had to go back through and see all the scenarios of conference win percentages and stuff. I thought there was someone that could usurp them, and even though they won, they could still fall to like 5th. But yeah, they clinched. So.
Hey, well, good for them. I mean, it's always a good thing when you can see Nate Davis in the playoffs, and maybe, just maybe, he could string together, kind of a storybook run and end his career on a championship win. That'd be pretty awesome to see for him.
Yeah, kudos to Roy Choi. He got both of his teams into the playoffs.
Yeah, 100%. And that was kind of the thing that I always thought about San Diego is that, Bay Area seemed like it was the favorite. Like they were putting a little bit more attention into Bay Area. But this season, San Diego has definitely gotten a lot of love from the ownership group as well. So, that's why they're there. So it's definitely fun to see. Fun to see all the parity over the last couple seasons where there's been a lot of teams going worst to first or, worst to playoffs and ending up being very competitive. Makes the IFL that much more interesting, in my opinion. So transitioning over to the AFL, as we all know, we have 2 games left before we know what the championship game will look like. And those games are set now. We have Albany versus Salina and Billings versus Nashville. This is a very interesting way to do things. And I wanted to get your guys' thoughts on that before we really get into the games. Obviously, as we know, Albany and Nashville are both from the eastern side of the country. They're in the East Division for the AFL. So for them to be playing opposite opponents, both the Western opponents, there's a potential we could see both East teams in the championship or both West teams in the championship. Does that strike you guys as odd, given how everything has worked out? Or is this a situation where it might be financially the right move for the AFL? Let's go to TJ first on this one.
With Jeff Fisher in as the leader now, it's probably definitely a financial move that helps the league out. Also, I don't see it as an outlier. I mean, let's face it, this hasn't been the easiest season either. So I don't think any decision that they really make is considered off the wall. But it would be pretty interesting to see if it does work out that way, 2 teams from the same, coastal area get in, since considering the Arena Bowl is in a neutral site this year.
That is one good point as well. I mean, being at a neutral site does help, although with it in New Jersey, Albany definitely has an advantage if they make it. So that'll be interesting to see as well. Cody, what are your thoughts on this? I mean, obviously the IFL does it quite the opposite, where we will never see the West face the West in the championship game. Did this throw you at all when you heard about how the seeding was going to be handled?
No, not really. I'm a hockey fan, so I'm used to seeing stuff in the past where the Toronto Maple Leafs were in the West, or just a few years ago in the COVID bubble, it was Montreal versus Tampa Bay, 2 teams in the East fighting for the Stanley Cup because of the restrictions and all of that stuff. So it doesn't bother me one bit. As TJ pointed out, it has not been the best of seasons for the Arena Football League. So I think just being able to crown a championship is the best case scenario, regardless of who it is, whether in the East or the West, what have you. So,
yeah, no, I completely agree. Obviously, this has been a rough season all year. The last 6 weeks or so have cleaned up quite a bit, and we've had a lot more stability. Partners being named left and right. In fact, this past week, they named that they were a partner with Yeti now. So Yeti's going to be all over the Arena Bowl. So that's kind of interesting as well. And then, putting the Arena Bowl in the American Dream Center, that is something that we did not discuss last week and that we definitely have got to get to. Before we get into the actual games, what are your guys' thoughts about the venue for the championship game? There's been a lot of talk about the fact that it's in a mall. It's in the ice rink of a mall. That it's a really odd choice for a championship game venue. But then you look back at some of the events that have been there and it starts to make a little bit more sense. The U.S. Curling Championship, big time hockey games, the Globetrotters, all these different events have come through there. TJ, when you heard the news about them playing the Arena Bowl in a mall, what were your thoughts?
At first, there was concern, but then I started to see pictures and how it's set up, and I could see it actually playing out pretty well, especially in terms of TV viewership, because when they show the crowd, all the different levels of the mall, it's gonna give almost like a Coliseum type feel to it. And, we always call it the indoor war. So it's almost going to add to kind of like, the specialty of arena football. I don't know exactly how. I read somewhere that they're obviously with the setup, there's not a lot of seating. So it's going to be a lot of standing room only. So maybe that'll help keep ticket costs down for standing room and get more people to come out and watch as well. But I can see it playing out pretty well, at least visibly for the league, especially since it's going to be on CBS Sports Network.
Absolutely. Cody, what are your thoughts on the venue, and what were your initial thoughts when you heard?
My initial thoughts were, why? And I'll be the contrarian here. I don't mind that it's in the arena that it's at. It's in an arena, so that's cool. I've made a joke somewhere online where it's like, I know, why don't they just have it outdoors? The Arena Bowl outdoors, and just had a picture of like the Spokane Shock and Utah Blaze from years ago when they did that one-off outside. But I think it's a little bit of a disservice. I know people have made the comment, and I kind of agree with it, where with how disastrous, if you want to use that term, this season has been, why not reward the fans of whoever is the higher seed? I think that's my biggest gripe is, why don't you just give it to the fans who have been there through thick and thin? They don't know if they're playing at home this week. They don't know who they're playing this week. I mean, you have an opportunity to host it. And again, I don't know. I'm fine with it being where it's at the American Dream. But like I said, if Albany goes, why wouldn't you have it in Albany? It's a very well established arena. It looks really nice. They've had arena bowls there before, if I'm not mistaken. Even if it's Billings, what happened? So it's just, I get it. I understand why, but still, just reward the fans. That'd be my biggest thing.
I like that point. I mean, I do think there is some reason to put the championship game in a home venue, especially if you're rewarding the number one seed. That makes a really big reason why you want that one seed, which I think is important going forward in future years, because then you keep those games competitive all the way till the end of the season, typically, because everybody's going to want to be fighting for that one seed to get that home championship game, because that's a huge advantage. And I know that, like you said, Albany's not necessarily playing at home, but New Jersey's just an hour down the road, right? So it's not like they're traveling very far to have to get there as a fan. So that's a good thing for Albany fans, assuming they make it. This is not going to be an easy game for them. You can't count out any team coached by Ron O'Neal, one of the greatest of all time, in my personal opinion. And he's also a Hall of Fame coach in the IFL for a reason. So, it may be the AFL, it might be a new league, but again, I wouldn't sleep on any team that he coaches in a playoff game for sure. So 2 great games this upcoming weekend. So I'm curious to get you guys' thoughts on them. We'll go to TJ first. Let's look at the Nashville versus Billings game first. Billings just signed Dylan Donahue. We'll get to that. You were the one who pointed that out. So first of all, how impactful do you think Dylan Donahue will be on this team for the playoff run? And then also, do you think Billings gets the win this week?
I was actually looking over some stats and stuff this week, and I was making my picks, and the signing actually made me flip. I was originally picking Nashville to beat Billings, but I think Billings has a true shot now. They needed a pass rusher, especially with the way Randy Hibbert's been playing since he's come back for Nashville. He's making everybody think who's been on the couch for a few years that they should come back out and play. He's been lights out. So the pass rush is needed. If they have any chance of winning the game, though, they have to get to Hibbert. They have to get him off his focus. They have to get him nervous about the line crashing down on him. So that the signing in itself just completely changed the outlook of this game and how it's going to be played. I can guarantee Nashville has definitely altered their game plan offensively because of this.
I would completely agree, and I like that you brought up that Hibbert's off the couch. If you get some pressure in his face, it's going to be a little bit different than a guy who is, maybe versed in the game, had been there, up until this point. Cody, what are your thoughts on this game?
I mean, I don't really have any opinion one way or the other. I don't know if the what is the Cinderella reference? If it's turning back into a pumpkin for Nashville this week. I have not watched enough AFL to be well versed in this. I will be brutally honest. I did watch the playoff game between Orlando and Nashville, and to me, that's all I need to know that Nashville is going to be the Arena Bowl champs. I'm kidding. No, Nashville looked all right. Randy Hippert has just been around for so long, so even if he's off the couch, he looked decent. So I don't know. You're traveling up to Billings. It's always a tough place to play up there, regardless of who is in that venue or what team is playing in that venue. I'm excited for the game. I'm actually going to watch it and see arena rules again and kind of get back into this thing. So, yeah, more football is always better.
Agreed. And sorry, I know I've got you kind of out of your element here. You're not normally an AFL enthusiast, but that's all right. This has been an interesting season so far, so we can kind of touch on it a little bit. But
You're good.
Looking at the other game, Albany versus Salina, this to me feels like a little bit more of a David and Goliath situation. You look at Albany, they've been rolling through teams all season long. A lot of games have been won by double digits, but as of late, they've lost a few. So I'm kind of curious. I mean, going to TJ first, do you think Albany ultimately finds victory in this game, or do we see Salina pull off the upset and make their way to a championship game?
Well, when I was, again, looking over stats, I actually took the plunge and picked Salina in an upset because of Albany's recent struggles. You don't know, did they maybe take the foot off the gas pedal a little bit, or are certain teams maybe finding some wrinkles in their offensive and defensive game plans? But Salina, the way they have been just gritty, winning games, it's like they know that they're not supposed to be this good in this league, and they just embellish the chip on their shoulder. And they would love nothing more than to go in and pull the upset off against Albany. Am I very positive on that? No, I honestly, this game is a toss up to me, but I think Albany, if they come out and they start off quick, it's going to be hard to keep up with them. But if they come out and start to kind of stumble a little bit like they've been recently, it could be a game up for grabs late.
Absolutely. And my big question for this game is Tracy Brooks healthy? Tracy Brooks is the focal point of that Salina offense, and we saw Jamario Benson finish up the game at running back for Salina because of the fact that Brooks got hurt. I'm not aware of the extent of his injury, but if Brooks is hurt, that changes a lot for Salina going into this game. They like to run the ball a lot. They're more of an indoor style offense than an arena rules offense. So that's another caveat to this game that's going to be very interesting to watch. Also, another quarterback that came back out of retirement. So interesting to see that we have two of the three that came back to the AFL in the playoffs. The other being Brian Villanueva, who did not find as much success as the Jake Medlock and Randy Hippert. Cody, what are your thoughts on this game? I know, again, that you're not more of a AFL enthusiast, but do you see Salina able to overcome the juggernaut that is Albany right now?
First of all, I want to correct something. AFL enthusiasts, the IFL just takes up so much time, so I can't really get to other leagues. It's not that I don't like the AFL, it's just, yeah. Anyway, for this game,
really fair.
For this game, though, if I saw correctly, Albany just signed Markel Wade, which is going to help out their passing game. Salina, I don't say they needed a miracle against Southwest Kansas because I watched that game coming down to the last play. Sorry, I just had to throw it out there. It happened. But, yeah, there's just something along the lines of, like, I don't know. Albany just kind of looks like that team destined to win the whole thing. Have they struggled? Yeah, looking at the stats right now and stuff like that, kind of going through their schedule, I just don't really see much of a concern. Is there one? Sure, you can see one, like TJ pointed out, but I don't know. I think this is just kind of destined. Albany, I think they're going to make the Arena Bowl, maybe win it. They just look stacked. Now, again, I say that with the preface of I have not watched all the games. I didn't go to Vyas or whatever and try and scope out all these games, so I could be completely out of my element. But just looking at what Albany has, they just look like a juggernaut.
Yeah, no, I don't think you're out of lane at all. I think Albany has looked great all season long. There's been some hiccups, obviously. Every team has them, but at one point it looked like Albany might run through the season undefeated, and they haven't. There were a couple games that they lost, but they've been really good. Kudos to Jake Medlock. I mean, he's been unbelievable this season, and I honestly was surprised. I didn't know what Albany would do at quarterback after Malik Henry signed with the Edmonton Elks. He's now back, but at the same time, he's come back, and they've still stuck with Jake Medlock. So, I mean, that just tells you how comfortable they are with him starting and how well he's played this season. And honestly, that's got to be, I don't know exactly what those guys are making, but that's got to be the most expensive quarterback room in the league right now. I don't think that Malik's making under, $2,000 probably. And if I had to guess, Jake's probably making over $3,000 now. Am I right? I don't know, but there's a lot of talent in that quarterback room. If Medlock went down for some reason over the next, 2 games, I would feel no different about Albany than I feel right now. I think Malik Henry has all the talent in the world to go in there and win games with this team. And I actually missed that Marquell Wade signing. So kind of interesting. He was with San Antonio previously, right?
I don't think he's played in the indoor football league. I think he was signed at one point, but was he with Orlando last year or Jacksonville last? I think it was with Jacksonville last year in the NAL, wasn't he?
I believe so. I'd have to look back, to be honest.
I don't think he's played in the indoor football league.
Okay, I thought he was with some. Who am I blanking? I'm mixing him up with somebody else in San Antonio, another former NAL receiver. I'm blank. I can't remember who it is at the moment. But any final thoughts to kind of wrap this all up before we get out of here for the day? Let's go to TJ first.
Just excited to catch the playoff action later and getting down into the regular season of the IFL. It's going to be a great weekend for indoor and arena football fans.
Completely agree. Cody, any final thoughts for you as well?
Only thing, the only gripe I have, because I love to gripe, is I wish the Indoor Football League would schedule it out. I know we talked about it last week and do it again this week. The 2:30 start, I know it's CBS Sports. The Indoor Football League wants to get more eyeballs. They've got to be able to kind of space out their games so everyone can kind of watch the games kind of one at a time and things like that. They did it earlier in the season, kind of go along like that. So I'm excited to watch this game at 2:30. Then you get some indoor games going on around 6 or 7. And tune in back on CBS Sports and 2 or 3 screens at a time to watch that Billings game as well with Nashville. So it's just, like TJ pointed out, it's going to be a huge day for playoff action, playoff implications in the Indoor Football League. Just have a day of football.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to it. We also have CFL games later as well. If you watch CFL, make sure to check out our show, Summer Showcase Northern Lights. That kicked off Thursday this week. So just a couple days ago, the episode is still up. You can go catch that right now. If you're a fan of the IFL, make sure you go tune in and subscribe to In the Alley, Cody's channel on YouTube as well. And then also make sure you have subscribed, liked, commented to Shady Sports Network, so you can catch mine and TJ's content at every turn. So with all that in mind, we really appreciate you guys all tuning in today. We had pretty good viewership the whole time. We really appreciate you guys getting up early every week with us and talking some indoor arena football. I know it's not for everybody. I know we're probably the minority out there in football fans, but at the end of the day, to me, indoor football is way more exciting than outdoor football at this point. So I'd rather talk about IFL, AFL, all that stuff 10 times out of 10 over outdoor football at this point. But that might just be me. Might just be you guys. That's why you're here. So we'll catch you guys next Saturday, and have a great weekend.
I'm just being myself, cool as can be. When I'm being myself, you wish you were me.
It's so easy. Get out your own way.